today we are talking about winning culture.
Man, shocker! I did not see that coming. Great job. Okay, so let me tell you about winning culture. When I was a wee young lad and I was in England in 2003, this is a little story to demonstrate winning culture. I went to England in 2003 for Bible college. For those of you that don't know, I knew nothing about rugby at all. I'll be honest. Even after
I still don't, but I like it.
Yeah, I still don't fully understand the rules.
That's all I know.
I know that like a knock on is whenever you fumble forward, right? And sometimes they'll call offside, or like these guys are just beating the tar out of each other for 80 minutes, and the dude will be trying to get the ball, and some guy will just plow him, perfectly legal. But then something else will happen, and a whistle will just go. I have no idea. So I still don't fully understand the rules of rugby, but I will tell you one thing. There is no such thing as a weak man that plays rugby, because those dudes,
that is true.
They are savages. I have a lot of respect for rugby players. So in 2003, I'm over in England for Bible college. Just so happens I'm down in London, and it was the weekend of the World Cup final for rugby, and England made it there. Okay. England was the first ever team from the Northern Hemisphere to win the Rugby World Cup, because if you know anything about that, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, those are the real dominant nations in rugby, especially New Zealand. They're the All Blacks. I'm sure you've heard of that. Yeah,
of course.
So, England, with all due respect to my English friends, they're not known for winning international tournaments. You may hate that if you're listening to this in England. I don't mean offense, but like their last trophy,
the only international tournament they ever won was world domination.
yeah.
And we've been on the steady decline for about 200 years.
They won the colonization game for sure, but they won a World Cup in soccer in 1966, and then this World Cup that they won in rugby in 2003 was the last one they won. It was also the first one that they won. But the reason I'm telling this story, so they got a coach in 1998 named Clive Woodward, and he actually got knighted. His name is Sir Clive Woodward. And what I remember whenever he won, afterwards, they started really diving into all his methods and tactics, because he turned the team around. They were actually the favorite going into the tournament, which that was never the case before. And when there was this quote that he said afterwards, he said, "I didn't change anything by 100%. I changed 100 things by 1%.
That's good.
And I loved that quote at the time. And there's all these stories that came out before. I mean, for example, in 1998, he switched hotels on tour in South Africa because he didn't think it was up to standard, and he paid for it on his own American Express card.
Wow.
Right? High standards. He looked at things like he brought in technology. Keep in mind, this is like the late 90s, early 2000s. Technology was not as advanced. He made sure that they had clean shorts and shirts for all the players at halftime. So when they come back out for the second half.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? And then he insisted that they would be in their seats 10 minutes before the start of meetings. He banished mobile phones. He would sweep the team's quarters for surveillance equipment, and he was.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That's what I mean. But he was known for being ruthless, but also very personable. And so you have this guy who comes in and elevates literally the entire standards of this rugby operation. And make no doubt about it, England are always a good World Cup team, or a good rugby team, but then gets them over the line. It was an incredible final. I can still see it in my head. They beat Australia, Johnny Wilkinson, with like a last-second kick. It was very dramatic. And people, I mean, if you know anything about England, they like to drink. And I still have.
And you were there?
I was there. Yeah, I was just in a bar, just watching everybody lose their minds. And I'm like 21. I was not a drinker at the time. I was just kind of there enjoying the festivities. These people went nuts. Like, it was winter time in England, and they're tearing their shirts off and jumping into Trafalgar Square fountains and all this sort of stuff. It was just a massive party.
Sounds like fun.
It was amazing, dude. I enjoyed being around it a lot. The whole atmosphere was incredible. But I give that as an example of a winning culture, because he went down. He was England's winningest coach. I think he's now been passed. But at the time, he went down as England's winningest coach, and all these things came out. And I love that story of someone who comes in, sees something, and starts affecting all the little details, and finds a way to raise the water for all the boats and get the results. So I think
that was a winning culture.
That was a winning culture, and they did not win another World Cup, but they kept going on, and he got knighted. So not a bad thing for Sir Clive Woodward. Now, guys, when we're going to winning culture today, we're fortunate that Garrett is part of, as I said, one of the most winningest cultures in all of humanity, I would say. The SEAL, I think I made a thing about the SEAL teams are undefeated.
They have a historic reputation at this point.
Yeah, and what we're gonna get on this podcast, we're gonna look at winning culture, not just in businesses, but in your life, in your personal life. We're going to get into the elements of what makes a winning culture, what it looks like when you're missing one of them, how you can get this into your life. So we're going to dive into that. But you have such great stories, G, and you guys, one of the things that teams have is accountability, right?
Oh, massive accountability. Well, it starts in SEAL training in BUDS, where one of the things they would do, this is like brutal, but it helps everyone. Because one of the things you have to have in a winning culture is you have to have some sort of a pecking order, because you have to know where people are at in in the culture, right? And in the program, right? There has to be a scoreboard. If you're going to be a winning culture, there has to be some way of keeping score, right? And you also have to know who's the best players, who's the lowest players. We'll get into that in a minute. One of the things that they had at SEAL training was peer reviews, which, like, what is that? Well, every week you would get a form of all the students. I think we would do this on like Thursdays or Fridays, but you'd get a form of all the students remaining in the class, right? Everyone who hadn't quit. And you're going to rank everybody from 1 to whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they would talk about who the top 5 were, and they would talk about who the bottom 5 were, right? And if you were bottom 5, they'd put you up in front of the whole class, and the whole class would talk about what they thought was wrong with you.
Every single guy would go around and say, like, so they're like, okay, Jim, and everybody would go through, and then they would move to Mike.
No, not every single person would comment, but like people who had something to say would say it, and they would also look at like what showed up in the peer reviews, right? If there was like, 30 people said, this guy takes care of his own stuff first. This guy's always in the front of the chow line. This guy, that stuff would get called out.
Oh, wow. So there's no place to hide. Now, you've told me this before. Most guys never recover from that.